Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Alexander, and we have been going back and forth on Twitter. Well, I guess he's been going on Twitter. He's been publishing these great videos of him reading white papers and just like getting through the entire white paper. And it sounded really interesting to kind of go in and investigate what Alexander learned. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about AI and you talk a lot about kind of reading these white papers. What's the biggest thing you've learned in the past few weeks?
Wow, in the past few weeks. So, yeah, I've just been trying to get a general fundamental understanding of crypto, Web3, because now I'm doing some smart contract engineering in the field. So, yeah, I just really want to get my bearings. Um, and so on that journey, I listened to a bunch of podcasts because I love podcasts. I'm like a total podcast addict. And after listening to crypto podcasts for long enough, you hear people talk about the white papers and they talk about them as if they're these magic
The Bible.
documents. The Bible, yeah, it's like the religious text,
Yeah,
especially Bitcoiners, because those guys are just,
it's
you
a
know,
religion.
it is literally a religion. And so I'm like, okay, let me take a look at these. Also, the company I'm now working for, uh, the engineers there recommended that I read the company's white papers, which of course, if you're joining a company, you should definitely read their white papers. So, I want to read these papers, but I'm a Gen Z and, years of
Dopamine.
terminally online video games, social media, um, it has a real impact on attention span. And reading a white paper is like one of it's like a boss battle attention span test, in my opinion. Like I've done a lot of meditation. I do Zen meditation where you just sit there for like an hour. Like that's like the longest I've meditated for like 1 hour. You just do nothing, focus on your breath. That is easier than reading a white paper. Like I would read the white papers and think to myself, like, man, maybe I should just meditate for an hour because it would be more like doing literally nothing would be more interesting than reading these white papers. Um, which isn't completely true. There's actually quite a lot of interesting stuff in them. Um, but basically, I would sit down, start reading the paper, and then go, okay, let me just grab some water. Let me go to the bathroom. Let me get a little snack. Oh, I'm a little out of focus. Maybe I'll just take a quick X break and then come back to this. Maybe I'll Google around a bit to get some more knowledge. And then I just like could not get through one. So, the way I think or the way I like to live my life is trying to hack stuff. I'm like I want to take what's out there, gain a bunch of knowledge and find some unfair advantage, like some workaround, you know, um, and and hack something. So I was like, okay, I love X, I'm posting on it all the time. It's addictive. Can I hack it in order to learn about crypto and read white papers? And I was like, okay, well, how about this? I've seen uh, posts before go, somewhat viral, go get popular of just people filming a time lapse of them working. Like there's this one guy who would do all-nighters and he would film a time lapse of him doing an all-nighter. And I would watch it every time because I'd be like, did this motherfucker actually go from like sunset to sunrise? And you could see like he has a window. He's like in a basement suite and there's a window and you see the sun goes down and then the sun comes up and I would stay till the end every time because I just wanted to see if he did it. Um, and staying till the end is what the algorithm really checks. That's how it knows to promote a video, right?
Hmm.
Um, so that yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about. I don't want to take too much of a tangent here.
No,
Maybe
well,
we
I
can.
mean, I got plenty we can go from there. The biggest thing that you said was um being a Gen Z and dopamine, the video games, the Twitter, online, it's funny because I think you actually have an advantage. It's probably harder to see from where you are now, but and I don't think it's shared among all Gen Z, but for
Hmm.
a small subset of Gen Z, it's kind of like an advantage because you guys were so deep inside of the internet, being online, that it's just not even a question of how crazy addictive it is. But for
Yeah.
everybody older, like the millennials, which includes me, or the boomers, or the Gen X, the boomers don't realize it. They don't have as much self-awareness. The millennials have more self-awareness because we saw it coming. But still, it's not to the same degree. We didn't literally grow up with this sort of cyborg thing. I got the beginnings of it when I was 6 or 7 year old, just because I grew up in the Bay Area and was around technology when it was first starting. Um, but totally different. And so this is really interesting. But I've tried to use Twitter in a similar way back when it was less effectively run, which was actually great because it allowed me to do these stable threads. I don't know if we were connected when I started doing these stable threads, but I think I started back in like 2016, 2017. I started using Twitter as my personal note-taking device. So I noticed that it's a great note-taking device and it's social. So sometimes your notebook like talks back to you, which I
Oh,
found
that's so cool.
it was great. And I did these stable threads, and it was like on one topic. Every time I got a new thought on that one topic, I would write about that new topic, and it would just be this thread. And then Elon Musk comes in and just destroys the algorithm for this thing, so they're not being seen anymore. My notebook doesn't really talk back to me anymore. Now I think I'm completely destroying my engagement. I'm not sure what it is exactly I'm doing, but my engagement is just completely flattened out. And so yeah, it's really interesting. So I love the video idea. I love that sort of like having this, because we are such social beings, this myth of the individual. Although I think individualism is very important, there's also this myth of it, like we're so mediated by our social environment that it's really a great hack to basically hack into that expectation accountability thing. So I think it's a really interesting. um, if you have anything you want to respond to in that, feel free. Otherwise, I have a bunch of follow-up questions about what you learned.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, yeah, then because I didn't fully get to the end of the story. So then I decide, okay, I'm going to film a time lapse of me reading a paper from start to finish. And the challenge will be to not leave my seat and not open Twitter, not go on my phone. My phone is filming a time lapse, so I can't use it. Um, and then, yeah, I posted it. It got like 130K views, which blew my mind. Like the most views on a tweet I ever got was maybe like a couple hundred. Um, and the response was so positive. Like people were so encouraging. Actually, there's a couple of haters, which was really hilarious. Like people were like a couple of people commented, like, oh, is it an accomplishment? Like, do you think it's an accomplishment to read? Is that how bad our society is? And I was like, yeah, bro, look around. It is fully
Nobody
an
can read a book.
accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, um, so that was pretty funny. But then it just created a virtuous cycle where I was like, okay, let's read another. So I read two more in the next 2 days because getting 130K views is such a massive dopamine hit. Like I'll totally chase that, right? Like 1,000 likes. Wow, like that's like the like your phone is just buzzing constantly with all these likes and comments or whatever. Um, and so yeah, it gave me a tremendous amount of motivation to read white papers, and then I went on and read like five more, and I just think that's really fucking cool that like you can go not exactly viral, right? Like I consider viral like maybe a couple million views, but like like 100,000 people will watch you read a paper, and you know, uh, like 60 of them will take the time out of their day to comment some type of support, like, yeah, you got this, keep going. Like that's actually really cool. And X is in my opinion, a really underrated app.
Yes. Very interesting. There's more we could go into on that, the sort of distributed cognition and not only distributed cognition between humans, which has always been the case, but you bring in writing, the invention of writing about 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, maybe longer than that. And then all of a sudden you have distribution of cognition socially, but also among time, so that it's no longer ephemeral. It's stable throughout time. And then you bring it to today where not only do we have writing, but we also have artificial intelligence, and we also have the internet, and we also have blockchains, all of which completely change the nature of the distributed cognition. But the most potent is still the social media, although it's going to change a lot. We could talk about how you think it may change, but
Mm.
there's but I also want to learn, like, what is the most technically surprising thing that you learned from reading these white papers? Like, there's the sort of dopamine and everything, which is really interesting, but is there anything that you just really caught your surprise about the way things work in any of the blockchains or in any of and I would love to understand more about the chain link one, if that spoke to you at all.
Yes. So I guess the what was interesting is how simple Bitcoin is. That was
Mm,
something that really stood out to me. Um, it's just a series of very simple ideas that was very hard to put together
at that time.
and figure out at the time. Yeah. And it's just so well explained. You know, I got I get why people treat it as this holy script, because there is a beauty to it. Like it's like,
Elegant.
yeah, it's very elegant. Especially after reading a couple of them and more modern ones. Uh, yeah, it just really stands out as as a work of art. It gives like Oppenheimer feelings, you know, like you gotta be playing the Oppenheimer music in the background while you're reading that paper because it feels like you're on the precipice of something, and you really are. They created a $1 trillion asset out of computers, right? Like that's wild to me. Um, yeah.
And
And
it's
so
go for it.
yeah, so the way information is stored in Bitcoin was really impressive to me. Like it's so simple. You would think that for Bitcoin, to own a Bitcoin, okay, maybe you gotta set up an account. You have to, send like a message to someone else. You gotta have a profile. You have to have a central database that keeps track of all the money and how much everyone owes each other. And what it really is like, you hear about the ledger, the blockchain. It's just a list of transactions. There's a lot going on in terms of like mining, validating,
But the
proof
data
of work,
itself, but the data
but the
itself is just a
data
list.
itself is
Yeah,
so bare bones.
yeah,
It's just transactions to addresses. It doesn't even say, address, like Stewart's address has 100 Bitcoin or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It just says, address A sent Stewart's address 50 Bitcoin, address B sent Stewart's address 50 Bitcoin, and it just knows from like it just has nothing else. It's so minimalistic, and I really think the smartest things, the most beautiful things are the simplest ones. The simplest ones that are easy to explain, easy to understand, and there's a genius in simplicity.
Yeah.
Um, so
The
yeah, that.
so let's talk about AI from here. I heard a long time
Mhm.
ago that smart contracts were actually the most applicable to AI because it's all on the blockchain, so it's all readable. So it's not like there's a bunch of closed source applications that are outside of the training data. That the training data for LLMs is for the most part has a lot of smart contracts in them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so all smart contracts are publicly readable. They're deployed on the blockchain. They are deployed as bytecode.
Uh-huh.
So there's if you download, let's say, all of the information stored on the Ethereum blockchain, you're just going to have a bunch of bytecode, and
Uh-huh.
bytecode is like code that only a machine can read. Humans can't. I mean,
Got it.
some crazy people out there might be able to read it. However, because it's out there public, the repositories are always or very predominantly open source and readable by anyone. And they also do audits to ensure that, and also contract verification, it's called. So basically, when you have a contract that's written in, let's say, Solidity,
Yeah.
Solidity is a very common programming language for smart contracts, and it's human readable. It looks kind of like another language called TypeScript, which is very commonly used in web development. So if you write a contract in Solidity and then deploy it to the blockchain, it's going to be compiled as bytecode. Now,
Uh,
compiled means you take this human readable code and a machine turns it into machine readable code. Why do we turn it into machine readable code? Because there's a lot of optimization that goes on. In human readable code, you have a lot of extra fluff, right? A machine doesn't need to
yeah.
like know what the name of a variable is or
Hmm.
something like that.
Interesting.
But human readable code, you got to come up with a variable name that makes sense for a human to read. You can't just name everything A, B, and C. Really minimalistic things. So it gets stored as bytecode, right? And then someone can interact with it on the blockchain. So let's say I want to call Stewart's contract that, like invests my Bitcoin and gives me like a yield to it. Well, I can't read bytecode. So let's say Stewart tells me, hey, I made this contract. You can give it some money. It'll give you a yield. Then you can take out your money. I just have to trust you because I go, well, it's bytecode. I trust Stewart. I think he's a great guy. He's got a good podcast. He's not going to scam me. However, that's not what, like, the entire point of blockchain is that no one has to trust anyone, right? So there's a thing called contract verification. And what you do is submit your Solidity written contract that's human readable
Hmm.
to a service that's managed by the blockchain. They do the compilation and then compare that bytecode to the
Oh,
bytecode
interesting.
on chain. And then if it matches, the contract is verified, and you'll have a human readable representation that's verified, then the bytecode living on chain that is, basically this entity, this trusted entity has said that they matched and
Hmm.
confirmed. So
I got a
then you
question.
don't have to trust
I got a
anyone.
question.
Mhm.
The bytecode. So you're comparing two things. Well, you're comparing the smart contract that's converted into bytecode onto the
Yeah,
blockchain, and you're
yeah.
comparing that bytecode with what?
With bytecode that is compiled basically in the same manner, but it's not on chain.
Got
So
it. So how does that so okay, so this is great for me because I'm learning a lot here. There's a smart contract that's between two parties, usually in Solidity, and we don't know each other, so it's sort of like trustless. We want it to be trustless.
mhm.
Then the smart contract is then written in Solidity, which is human readable. And this gave me an interesting insight into code in general because it's basically not just for the machines, but it's for other humans also working on that code to both know what's going on.
Yeah.
But then there's this other thing, which is that it's trying to interact with a blockchain. And so how is the bytecode verified by the blockchain? Like this may get into like the actual virtual machine on Ethereum if we want to go into that, but the like what's going on in those places for lay people?
So I'm not actually sure the specific details of verification other than some party managed by the blockchain will do that verification process. And so basically what you have is, so Stewart makes a contract in Solidity, uploads it to the blockchain, and it's compiled in bytecode.
Uh-huh.
No one can read that bytecode, so we have to trust
Got it.
Stewart
Okay, I get it.
in order to interact with his contract. However, Stewart can send his human readable contract to some group managed by Ethereum. If that group will compile it into bytecode, compare it to what
Got
Stewart
it. Yeah.
says he's put on chain. If it matches, then it's verified and that's stored somewhere so that other people can see it and know what code is being run when they execute the smart contract that's
Hmm.
unreadable to them. It's
Hmm.
now read and certified or
Got it.
verified.
That was really helpful. And so now taking it back to AI, how does that, how is that, and we want to talk about AI in general as well, and how software development
Mhm.
as a skill might be sort of not necessarily the best thing to invest your time in right now. Uh,
Yeah.
how do those two things relate?
So for these large language models, you need to train them on data. And it's really just about the quality of the data, the amount of data you have, and data sources are extremely, extremely important. So if you want your LLM to be really good at coding a specific type of software, it's got to be able to see a lot of that software.
Mm.
And because all the software that goes on the blockchain is uh, public code basically, and then it gets verified and it's, open source that's put out there on the internet so anyone can read it because everyone wants their contract to be used and interacted with,
Mm.
but no one trusts those contracts, so they have to get it verified, which means they
Mhm.
have to post their code out there on the internet. That means that these LLMs have a ton of smart contract training data out there and basically can train on all smart contracts ever written. So, yeah, LLMs should be wizards at creating these smart contracts. And I've definitely felt that they are a very helpful tool in understanding smart contracts, architecting them, uh, yeah, just coding in general. And I would love to talk about
Yeah,
where
let's go into it.
software is going.
Yeah, where is software going?
So actually I want to turn it around on you. I want
Sure.
to hear what you, yeah, and then I'll weigh in.
So basically, I mean, I've now been running the AI. So I got a job at a company that was one of the main vendors for OpenAI, and it was only a few months after, and quite strangely, serendipitously, ended up at this company right after ChatGPT was announced. Basically, inside this company that was growing massively, going through hyper growth, all being a vendor to OpenAI. And I got into this company, and this is a really interesting company because the all the people at this company were experts in machine learning models. Lots
Wow.
and lots of really smart programmers who are implementing the details of machine learning models. And there's a whole bunch of business process outsource people. They were doing a particular algorithm that required a huge amount of human labor to go over JSON, and go over a bunch of different inputs to make sure the LLMs were accurate. And so had this really interesting experience where I'm surrounded by all these people who know all these juicy details about these machine learning algorithms, but I was teaching many of them how to actually use the LLMs to become productive. I was leading workshops with it because something about language with the LLMs allowed me to really get it really quickly, intuitively inside the chatbot. I'm not talking about the API, I'm talking about the chatbot experience. And something about that language and linguistic ability allowed me to like maneuver the language of it to get stuff done inside of an organization. So I started teaching these workshops. Ended up moving on from that company, and I started to here in Buenos Aires started a weekly meetup called the AI Whispers, where I tried to find other people who had the same gift as me to basically linguistically get what I was looking for. Um, and over the past 2 months, we've started to do workshops where we're teaching totally non-technical people how to get the AI to prompt the AI to give it code and then get that code to get run. So we're not teaching anybody how to code. We're teaching people how to get the AI to code for them because my
Wow.
thesis is that and this has been proven as soon as 3.5 came out, I was like, oh, this is what I need to finally start coding. And then I realized, okay, this is what I need to get to do the coding for me because I'm never going to be better than this thing at coding. It's always going to surpass me at coding. But if I know how to maneuver it and get all these things together, then it allows me to take advantage of this thing that allows me to leapfrog the necessity to code. And so then I started in the last few months I've been sharing what I've been learning about coding, and that's just keeps on I keep on being proven accurate that this thing is getting better and better. Went from Chat GPT 3.5 to Chat GPT 4 to Claude Sonnet 3.5. And now 2 days ago, Replit releases their agent. And all of the things that I've been teaching these non-technical people how to do to get their code deployed to the website, I just throw one prompt into the Replit agent, and it does that exact same thing that I've been teaching these people how to do. This Replit agent just goes and does it, and I was able to deploy it. And it was actually we got all the humans to deploy this a week ago, but it was a significant challenge to get it to do a API call from a hosted deployed website. That was like a really big challenge that only about 60% of the people in person got it. And then within 5 minutes, this Replit agent does that and deploys
Wow.
it. And
I
so
haven't even checked that out.
it's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
I went from an agent bear to an agent bull. I now think agents are here, and I think agents are really important. And I'm also starting to realize that we might be significantly close to autonomous AGI. Like, because if this
Yeah.
thing can build applications, and this is just the alpha version of it,
Yeah.
like in 6 months, this thing is going to be building applications, and I think there will be a lot of edge software that really does still require a lot of human beings to solve something new. An example would be I don't know what's going to be in the future, but an example would be Facebook in 2006 or 2007 trying to do an entire machine that maintains state for a billion people. Like that type of technical challenge is still probably going to be humans for the next few years at least. But anything outside of that is going to be able to do that. It feels like the AI is going to be doing. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Anything you want to add?
I completely agree with everything you said. I'm so glad I turned that around on you because I could not have said it better than myself. And also, while you were saying that, I was thinking a very interesting question. And let me think on how to
Sure.
phrase this. Something like, so basically, what I'm thinking is we're almost in competition with AI as with all of these chatbots,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So, like, as a human, if you want to do a job,
Yeah.
you're going to have to compete with a chatbot. So, let's say you just started learning something, like for you, it's coding. Can you learn faster that you can be better than the AI, basically? So, if you started learning computer science today and you're in your first year of university, God help you if that's the case. Um,
Particularly
like
with
in
what
the
they're teaching, because the style of teaching inside a university is the exact opposite. If I were dictator and immediately had control over all of the universities in the world, I would teach the exact opposite every university is currently teaching. Like I would say, use this AI as much as you can, learn how to navigate this thing as much as you can. So if you hold on to that thought, because I want to give a little bit of a nuance into what I think, which is essentially that it's not necessarily competing. If you're talking about the individual skill like coding, yes, 100%. I am in competition if I tried to learn how to code, but I would also fail that competition. So I guess I would it's just like I've already given up in that competition because I just know that I know the limits of my competency and I'm not going to learn how to code better in Python in 6 months by the time it's better, way, way better at coding Python. But the human being is beyond the linear understanding of the of our, well, this gets into a little metaphysical, our conscious aspect, the linguistic and spatial feeling I have of me, Stewart, sitting in this room is a little bit of an illusion, because under my understanding, reality is combinatorial explosive, complex to the like infinite degree.
Mm,
And the my little understanding is this really, really helpful evolutionary piece that allows me to make all of that complexity sort of manageable. And but that's not who I am. This conscious linguistic is an important aspect of who I am, but it's not who I am. And that who we are is I want to say removed, but it's just not. It's in the same way that reality itself is complex. Who I am is also complex to that same degree because I'm part of reality. And so we only are aware, we human beings evolutionarily are very much a problem solvers, and so we're constantly trying to solve problems out there in the universe, and we're sort of limited by the problems that we have in front of us. Like my imagination, I can't, I try to think about what's going to happen in 5 years with all these different things, but my
mm,
imagination has limits in place, which is that the current environment is constrained and I have to deal with those constraints, and my imagination is somewhat blocked by those. A lot of those constraints are about to be removed, and so
yeah.
what does the human do? Well, the human has this beautiful imagination, which has sort of been kind of disregarded for the past 60 years as we become hyper focused. That imagination, I don't think the AI can access that. I think it will access parts of it. And I think it will really challenge us as to what we think a human really is. But I don't think it's going to get to the whole thing. So I still think that humans are going to play a very, very important role in this. But it's not going to be the role we've played for the past 200, 500,000 years, 2,000 years, basically.
Wow. Yeah, it does. The conversation just converges on what is consciousness at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's what it comes to. And it's just a reflection of how insane the times are that we live in right now. Like I always talk to boomers and I say, like, I think we're living in the craziest time to be alive. And they'll always tell me, oh, that's what everyone thought, that, or just a
Yeah.
lot of
This is
people push
different.
back.
This is different, bro.
Oh, in medieval times,
Yeah.
the wagon came out and everyone thought the world was, no, man, it is different.
I
Yeah.
think it's so weird.
Like it's called and I would like to, I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with the idea of singularity, like
Uh-huh.
technological singularity. If I describe that, would that be a waste of
Yeah,
their
yeah,
time?
they absolutely. They've everybody's heard a million times.
Okay, yeah, then we don't have to talk about that. But yeah,
Well, no, no,
we're
we can't
approaching.
talk about it because I would love to hear what you were going to say about like because well, singularity is really interesting. I'm not sure if you've seen my tweets recently. I'm somewhat critical of the singularity thing because I think it's part of the third great awakening in the United States, a religious movement. I'm not sure if you are you familiar with the first or the second great awakening inside the United States. They're sort of arcane religious revivalist movements. The second one led to the Mormons, and I think that the 1960s, where the singularity kind of stuff got started, is part of the third great awakening inside the United States, which is the singularity stuff feels like a new religion. And it's a millenarianism religion in the sense that there's an end times. But the singularity is interesting because it's almost like a utopia end times, but it is an ending for humans. Um, if you have anything to say, but I'm very open to hearing other perspectives of the singularity. I don't mean to discount it or anything like that. What's your take there?
Well, so yeah, that's interesting that you think it will be a utopia. That's cool. Like I like to think optimistically, and there's really no point in being a doomer, other than having a healthy amount of cautiousness, but you don't have to be a doomer to hold that.
Yeah.
But I think I just like the black hole analogy.
Mm.
Um, the singularity of a black
Mm.
hole is the point where you're sucked into it and there's no return.
Yeah.
And also, the part that is talked about less frequently is that you cannot see inside of a black hole. Light
Mm,
does not escape. So
mm.
you cannot see past
Yeah.
the bounds of the singularity. And I think the way that applies to the technological uh, metaphor is that we have no idea what the world will look like because it is a singularity.
But
You get sucked into it. Like technology reaches a escape velocity that we cannot predict what will happen with levels of intelligence that we cannot comprehend.
and so this does kind of bring the boomer comment back into it, which is like, isn't that already the case? Not in terms of technology. Like I agree with you that this technology will defy any sort of ability to understand without being part of it, without in that moment, 5, 10 years from now, like we won't know what that entails. We can't know what that entails. And like if we're a Amish person sitting on the outside, it'll just look like a bizarre, like the depictions that they give of angels, where it's like just this bizarre thing that
Right.
your mind can't really put it. It's just like, oh, that's weird. But the same, it's like metaphysically, we're always in this moment of judgment where it's I have no idea what's going to happen the next month. I've got a relatively, I mean, in the next minute, I've got a relatively good idea of what's going to happen the next minute or 2 minutes. But particularly in a podcast, like it's extremely difficult for me to know where we're headed in five minutes. Um, like the basic, the who I am, all these like kind of like habitual things, like all that seems. But then death comes in, like the death of the physical form, like beyond that is a gate at which I know nothing and it's pure uncertainty. And so that's
Yeah.
already like a human element that we deal with and that we've been dealing with thousands of years, is that there's a gate which exists which destroys the perception, and at that gate, like we do not know. There's all these theories about what happens, so it feels like yes, it is different, but at the same time it is kind of the same thing we've been dealing with this entire time, and that the tools that we've had for thousands of years are very applicable in the but as we've said, the question comes right back to consciousness, which has not been a question that seems very important for a lot of people for the last 100 years, like 50 years, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it does. But I would argue that so death for you is uncertain, but your death for me is not uncertain. If so the way you comprehend your own death, you go, okay, there's death, and then I don't know what comes next. For me, comprehending your death, I
Mm.
go, Stewart is going to die,
But I'll still keep on
and I
going.
know what will happen next. His body will be there. We'll bury it. It will sit in the grass and decompose, and then I will continue on with my life, but I'll be missing Stewart. And so, but then for my own death, I go, well, what's coming next? Well, will I, move on to another realm? Will my consciousness take another form? Will I join the super consciousness of the universe, or will I be reincarnated? Will I, you know, burn in hell for eternity? But, but so yeah, there's like, but for technological singularity, everyone is uh, experiencing the same kind of
as
death rebirth cycle.
as long as they plug in, right? Because it's like in that merging, because I don't see how the singularity doesn't happen without a merging, but I guess people could argue that the merge has already happened. We've been talking about it this entire time. Like we're hooked it on to this online world. We Things happen in this online world that both you and I experience all the time, but an Amish guy in the woods is like totally outside of it. Just like all the events through which we give significance don't really happen. And so like there could be an argument that's already happened. We're already merged, but there seems to be a deeper level of merging that will happen as well. And that for anybody outside that deeper level of merging with the technology, it will just appear as the same thing as like it just becomes nonsensical to discuss what happens on Twitter with the Amish people in the same way it'll become nonsensical to discuss what happens in this crazy AI enabled cyborg world, basically.
Yeah, I just think we don't know if it's even possible to sit this one out. Are the changes so drastic that it
Yeah,
affects everyone,
yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, that's why it's
Is it, this is a
So
good question. Is it possible, is it going to be possible to sit this one out? So let's go like, because AI,
yeah.
we there, like we can both of us are enough inside the AI world to understand a little bit of the flavor of what's going to happen. So in the last few days, I've started to understand that it's the like just like that Doom demo where somebody just trained an LLM. I think it was Google trained an LLM on Doom from the 1990s, the video game from the 1990s, and then instead of having a whole generated world, the world was generated on the fly and it looked exactly like Doom. So you take that, you take generative graphics and you take generative stories and you take generative images and you take generative music and you combine all those things together and then you put them on the internet and also potentially down the line on VR and AR, like that's going to create worlds. But how do those worlds kind of develop? It feels like I did an interview yesterday about they're going to generate based on customization. And how does that change the internet? Because so far, the internet developed under the context that we're sort of in this one globe and a global perspective. And that was very much from the 1960s with the space flight and the and seeing the Earth from the outside perspective, and that created the internet, or the internet was created after that, and then the internet fractured everything into a whole bunch of different worlds of interest. And now you add that AI generated aspect, and it feels like it's just going to create sort of new worlds that are customized based on our own feedback systems. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? What's your take there?
I would argue that a social media feed is a world,
Yeah, yeah,
and that is exactly what's happening right now. You have an AI curating a world for you, generating it
yeah.
basically. The content is created. Well, now it's starting to be created by AI, right? That
Yeah.
we're, one in every who knows how many posts is completely generated by AI. And we're converging on, yeah, full world generation where everyone's in their own, like, oh man, are you worried about echo chambers? Well, you should be worried about,
Your own,
like
it's your
everyone's
own
their
echo
own
chamber.
matrix.
Yeah, because again, and this goes back to the tools that we've been given over the past 1,000 years. Is it's always kind of been that way, but now it's just going to be with napalm on it. It's like,
Yeah.
and so how do we stay sane?
Yeah, that's a good question. I touch grass, man. I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah. Dance, laugh, have fun, travel. Don't need to travel, but stay in nature. Like breathe a bunch. There's a lot of tools out there. Again, it goes back to thousands of years. It's like we've had tools. We're not like the world as it existed for the past 1,000 years has also not been a utopia. It's been quite intense and quite challenging for a long time. And I question whether it will be a utopia. I don't I like in this infinite generated worlds. It feels like it's going to be both utopia and dystopia, depending on what you're choosing. Sort of like a
Mhm.
new age hyper reality tunnel type of thing.
Yeah. And question is, do we just stay in our own world with our AI generated friends or our
Mm.
AI
Yeah,
girlfriend,
yeah,
or do we enjoy these worlds together?
yeah.
And
Yeah. This is a really good question for you specifically because you're part of Gen Z, and so Gen Z is, I think, most liable to both breaking free from it for a small percentage, but also for the larger percentage, not at all even questioning it. And I'd love to get your perspective. It sounds like you're questioning it a bit. Yeah, I think from this conversation, I imagine that you're probably going to be one of the guys who gets out of this in a sane way. But what about your compatriots? Uh, what's the sense you get from people in your age group?
I think that a lot of people in my age group are very behind on AI, um, like and unexpectedly so. Like you would think a lot of us would be super tuned into AI, knowing how it works, knowing the landscape, what's coming out, but it's actually like quite downstream. People use ChatGPT, but that is about all.
Yeah.
people do. Like, no one's even really generating images. Like maybe some artists are, um, but yeah, AI usage is quite lower than you might expect. So I think it's just going to hit my generation by storm. I think people don't even understand that an AI, hyper intelligent AI that's tracking everything they like and swipe on and comment on, share, pausing on a certain video. I don't think they realize how, to
Mm.
what degree they're being tracked and observed and catered to. Um, because the AI is just so abstracted. And a funny quote or a funny thing someone told me about TikTok. This girl, I was on a date with her, and she said, I started using TikTok and I didn't like it. But then I figured out how to use it. And now I love TikTok because I can use it to find, my favorite restaurants or recipes
Uh-huh.
or this, that. And it was like, you did not figure out how to use it.
It
It
figured out how
figured
to
out
use
how to
you.
use you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so
Uh, yeah.
people are still thinking that they're in control of these things, that they're, oh, but it's completely manipulating them. And so I think, yeah, like you said, there's going to be a small percentage of people who are uh, who understand what's going on and can utilize these technologies and build on them and hack them.
Mm.
But the majority of people are just going to be swept up in it and enjoy being swept up in
Yeah.
it.
This reminds me exactly of Jacques Ellul, who is a French philosopher from the 1960s, I believe, Christian anarchist, believed that the way technology, called it la technique, and la technique has the way the technicality of modern civilization just breaks everything into efficiency, and we've got to get this efficiency going, and it doesn't matter, any of the other variables don't matter, it just matters how efficient we're becoming. And so
Mhm.
this was back in the 1960s. This is before software engineering, before like all these different things. And there's
Wow.
just this really interesting sort of dominate versus submit type of thing. And it that technology appears to be submitting. It appears to be a submissive force, but it's not. It's a dominating force in this
Mhm.
weird thing, and it also kind of relates to politics as well, in that we're it's no longer centralized politics. Like 150 years ago you could have one centralized leader. And it was kind of decentralized because Stalin wasn't just Stalin. He had all of his group of people that he was depending on, but then he eventually killed them all. And but then there was a new group of people who came and supported him, and then they were always scared. And so like it wasn't complete centralization, but it was far more centralized. If we look at the political parties a lot, like it's not really a centralized thing anymore. It's a decentralized thing, and you can see this in the 1960s as well with the French student revolutions, which also were similar in the United States, where it was like because of this TV, because of this new model of reality, and like the idea of a middle class, and all, like it allowed for people to coordinate in a decentralized manner. And so this la technique, this force in civilization is challenging because we're totally so focused on the little tiny details, and we're forgetting the giant forest we live in. And it's going to be crazier and crazier with technology, and technology in with the appearance of submitting is going to become more and more dominant for most of the people, unless, and this is where sort of Nietzsche, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nietzsche, but Nietzsche, kind of his will to power is an important understanding to those of us who don't want to just go gently into that dark night of weird, idiocracy, and want to create something beautiful, and contribute to a flourishing of humanity. Because I'm an optimist. I think that on the long medium term that this is all going to be very good for human flourishing, but could also be quite crazy in the near term. And yeah, what's your take there?
yeah, it's just quite quite insane times, and sometimes I just wonder if it's even worth it to like should we just be kind of hanging out? Like we're in a waiting room right
Yeah.
now, and it's not fun to be in a waiting room, you know? Um, and so another thing I wanted to touch on that we were talking about previously is the rate of learning. So
Yeah.
like and how we're learning. So if you start learning a subject now because you want to acquire a skill that can go out and make money, so in 1 year, will you be better at that skill
Yeah.
than the like ChatGPT 5? Because in a year that will be out. It might be out in a couple months, actually. And then in 2 years, will you have more skill than ChatGPT 6? And so on. So it's like, at what point does the rate of human learning get eclipsed by the rate of AI
Yeah.
learning? And
But
what does that mean for learning in general? Like,
yeah.
should you even learn something if you'll never be good as an AI?
So this is actually directly related to my strategy for learning, and this strategy is the same one that I used on Twitter. I also used spaced repetition software in order to do things. The one key thing I think we're missing in this conversation is that the prompting something requires an understanding that that thing exists. And it also requires a meta understanding of the thing. And I'll give you a direct example that's really related to what we were talking about with AI whisperers and with teaching people how to code who don't know how to code, including myself. I don't know how to code. And so when something goes wrong, if
Mhm.
I had you right there, you would be able to figure it out probably in about
Yeah.
a tenth of the time. For me, I have to go through all these different things that the AI sends me of like, well, it could be this, could be that, could be this, could be that. And then I have to research all of those things to get an understanding. And this happens over days. So eventually I do figure it out. Uh,
Right.
but like there is this. So I don't in the short term, I think that software engineers have a huge arbitrage opportunity, like massive,
Yeah.
massive arbitrage opportunity.
I
And
like the way you
yeah,
put that
yeah,
arbitrage. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What do you think? Like, because that's kind of contrary to what you just said about learning, but only in the short to medium term.
Yeah. Well, I think right now the good software developers have AI superpowers.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can code now in any language, any language. Just
Yeah.
throw it my way and I'll be able to read it, code it, debug it. Because if you have a certain fundamental understanding of software engineering and you're comfortable, you've learned one language really well, you understand, compilers, you understand under the hood what's going on,
Uh-huh.
how
Yeah.
memory is used, you understand a bit about object-oriented programming, how to structure a code base, kind of the basics of computer networking and
Uh-huh.
cloud storage, cloud hosting. That's it. That's all you need to now go ahead and use AI to build pretty much anything you want. And there is a phenomenon where AI creates code that it cannot debug.
Yes, yes.
And
This
so,
is I keep on running into this with the agent as well, with both Claude and the agent. That's when I know that I have to go learn something, is when it can't debug
yes.
itself, basically.
Yeah, I think it must be some kind of law of entropy or
Yeah.
thing like that that it's running up against. But yeah, it'll get into these loops where it'll tell you it knows how to solve the problem, but it's just stuck, and it eventually it's not even changing the code at all and almost gaslighting you that the code is fine and that it's fixed it and kind of giving you the same set of 10 steps to take and they just over and over again as if that's gonna solve the problem. And that might be also due to its limited memory that it can't remember
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
things
What
that
it
it's
did. What it did.
trying.
Which is
Yeah.
the craziest thing, because I think so many people on Twitter specifically are sort of fooling themselves about the consciousness of this thing and whether it can do reasoning. I find the doomers are very, very interesting to kind of peer into their psychology at the same time as they're trying to take these little hints from the psychology of the LLMs to say, okay, no, it's going to kill us all. Like it's too powerful. And then I'm like, have you tried to get it to code a piece of software for you? Like what's like
Yeah.
it doesn't do it. It's like it needs a huge amount of guidance still. But again, like, it's all like, who the future is up for grabs in terms of what's actually going to happen. So they might be right. But um, uh, if you were a last like 5 to 10 minutes or so, if you were a junior developer trying to get a job right now, well, actually, first let me ask you: would you consider yourself? Would you consider yourself a senior or a junior, or is there a medium engineer? Is there a mid one? Where do you put yourself on that perspective right now?
That's hard to say because with it's just hard to
It depends
define
who
that.
it's.
And
Yeah,
there's so many
yeah.
different specializations in software. So I'm a junior smart contracts
Yeah,
engineer.
got it. Got it. Yep.
I've only been doing that for really a month.
Yep.
Um, in terms of creating like a SaaS cloud hosted product, I would not call myself a junior engineer.
Yep.
Um, Definitely not a senior engineer, but yeah, it's you know that whole like comparison
It's
between
hard. It's so crazy.
software
It's so,
developers,
yeah.
yeah, it's getting harder to compare because if you are using the latest tools, you can fill in a lot of your knowledge gaps quite easily. It's like being able to ask a senior developer everything they know about programming in a certain language and just having them sit with you all day. Like
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
have a senior developer sitting with you all day that you can ask any question you want, and you already have a good amount of fundamental
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah. Yeah. It's
in
like
like
lightning.
debug code. Yeah, it's what level of developer does that make you? Um, and the person who actually suffers the most, it is arbitrage because the person who not exactly suffers, but the person who benefits the least is the senior software developer. They're not benefiting from AI at all, right?
Wait, why? I thought they would be the most liable. Oh, because they're sort of they're because they call themselves a senior software developer that they already know how to do it. So they're the ones least likely to use AI. Why? What do you mean there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't, AI doesn't really help them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? They're,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, maybe if they wanted to transfer their skills to another area, it could translate their knowledge of a certain framework and language to a different programming language and area. However, in their domain,
Yes.
they
They don't
write
need it.
code fluently, they debug easily, they understand these very large systems, and they don't need ChatGPT, right? They don't need Claude.
And so, but now for those senior developers, at least the ones who use AI, and it was so interesting for me to originally easily intuitively understand once 3.5 came out that this was the answer that I needed for myself to finally get across this bridge of coding, which I did not like, and then talk to so many engineers over the past 2 years and be like, just have a total non-curiosity. That's changed over the last few months. Now a lot
Mhm.
more when I ask them, are they using AI? Are they using Cursor? Are they using these tools? They're like, okay, yeah, we're using this. And so
Yeah,
the senior engineers, they don't need to hire junior engineers. So the question I was going to ask you before is, if you were a junior engineer, if it is your first job getting paid to code, you just got done with a computer science degree, or you've been teaching yourself. That's another good question: is whether you think I know the answer. My answer between self-taught and computer science, who's going to benefit most from AI, also depends on the individual. But if you were a junior developer, well, what would you do in order to get a job? Do you think it would be totally hopeless? Because that feels like it's just like a senior developer is not going to hire a junior developer anymore because they're just going to be like, oh, well, I just use AI to do this thing rather than add a new human into it, which has all these other costs to it. What's your take there?
yeah. So I think interest rates being higher has caused the
Yeah, that's also true.
tech job market to get kind of crushed, and we're at pre-COVID levels of uh, new
Entries.
job positions being opened in software. So there's kind of that macroeconomic phenomena going on. And then as far as AI goes, the senior developers wouldn't replace a junior dev with AI yet.
Uh,
There's not enough trust. it still has to be kind of managed, but there are much less junior developer jobs going around
Yeah,
right
no
now.
way.
It is really tough out there. I know several amazing programmers, really solid engineers who cannot find a job. And there's a oversupply issue of software engineers
Yeah,
right now.
yeah,
So if I was a junior developer, what I would do is try to be an entrepreneur. And that was my plan. I looked at the market and I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be a dogfight to get a job at, in big tech or just at like a really good software company. So instead of trying to apply for those jobs, I'm going to use AI to attempt to create my own because we're in this amazing time right now where if you do know software and you have product ideas, you can go ahead and build them faster than ever for cheaper than ever. So that's what I'd recommend doing. Try and build your own product. You're gonna get a ton of super relevant experience on the way that can be applied to a job. If you build in public and share what you're building, you're basically advertising yourself as an engineer to these companies, and you can attract recruiters or people looking to hire engineers. So basically, worst case scenario, none of your startups pan out, and you're doing Uber on the weekends to keep the lights on. Uh, Middle case scenario, you get hired at a tech company and you get a job because of all this new experience you've acquired, and you've been building in public, and you've kind of uh, you've networked and found your way into a good position. And then the ideal scenario is that you've created a amazing product that people like to use and you've leveraged AI, and now you have a startup that is, you know, getting some revenue and get some investment, and you can work for yourself.
yeah. And that leaves the sort of glaring hole in our conversation is distribution and human to human relations, which is so far from all the technical details that we've been talking about so far, and it's so much more subjective and it's so much more weird, and it is learnable, but it's not learnable in the same way as engineering. It requires this social intelligence that
Mm.
is really fascinating and is not going to go away. Like, it feels much less likely that the AI even touches this business development, human relationships, those types of things do not feel like they're, I mean, I think there are a bunch of little tiny jobs within that are going to improve, but the actual just when you're relating to a human being in a commercial, transactional, or transformational way that involves money, it's just such a large other playing field that AI is going to help with, but I don't think it's going to touch in the same way that software development is going to change significantly. But
Yeah, totally.
mhm.
Marketing is might be one of the last things AI does really well.
And sales too, because it's not just marketing.
Yes.
The
Yes.
the the
Yes.
the actual, like, why does somebody buy something? How can you influence them to buy something? What are all the what are all the negative externalities of buying and selling things? Where are all the things that go wrong? Where are all the things that go right? Like, so it's so subjective. It's so weird. It's so much based on our sort of monkey or among like our monkey evolution, but also not just our monkey evolution, but about beauty and competence and all these other things. That it's just a totally different world, which I keep on going back and forth whether I want to do that or whether I want to be technical or whether I want to go explore deep tech, hard tech, go get on satellites or put satellites into space or space factories or nuclear power or all those things, which are also coming down the line. May not be as quickly as AGI, but also might improve. But this has been so much fun. How can people find you if you're writing, or if you do want to share? You don't have to share, but how can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I'm on X as at Alexander Tweets, and instead of E's for the tweets, it's threes. So TW33TS at Alexander Tweets.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Stuart.